Silver Plume, Colorado, a sleepy, semi-ghost town nestled in the Rockies, once a mining hub, now a place for people to disappear or vanish. In the summer of 1988, a seasoned sportswriter took a sabbatical and moved here with the dreams of writing a novel and rediscovering himself. He rented a little antique shop in the same building where the previous owner had mysteriously disappeared a year earlier. While on a hike, he vanished too, just like the previous owner. This is one of Colorado's most bizarre missing persons cases. Welcome to Morbid Outdoors, the podcast that ventures deep into the shadows of the wild. Here, we unravel the mysteries of missing persons, explore spine-chilling legends, and share the most morbid stories that nature has to offer. From the depths of the dense forest to the highest mountain peaks, we'll uncover the secrets that lie hidden in the great outdoors. Join us as we navigate the eerie, the unexplained, and the terrifying. So if you dare, grab your gear and let's embark on a journey into the unknown. This is Morbid Outdoors. Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday. My name is Elise, and I'm your host. And the past two episodes that I've recorded, I have felt like the audio sounds off and not typically like it does normally. I hope that makes sense, but it just sounds weird to me. So will you let me know if I haven't changed anything. I haven't changed my microphone or my setup or anything. So will you take a second to comment if you think it sounds different or weird, or if it sounds the same and it's just all in my head? Thanks so much. Because I obviously don't want my audio quality to go down, but to me it just sounds off. So please let me know what you think. So, thank you for listening today. I appreciate you tuning in. We're going to be discussing a very, very famous true crime case, missing persons cases out of Colorado. I mean, I say it's famous because I've heard about it before, but maybe you haven't. So let's dive into it. Today, we are actually going to be discussing Silver Plume, Colorado. Silver Plume is a former mining camp along Clear Creek in the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains, and more specifically, it's in the Arapahoe National Forest. Now, the census in 1890 said almost 1,000 people. At 1960, it was below 100 people, and the most recent census in 2020 says that there are about 207 people that live in Silver Plume. Silver Plume is located in the valley of Clear Creek. Interstate 70 and US Route 6 pass through the town, which access from exit 226. Now, it's 20 miles or 32 kilometers west across the Continental Divide to Silverthorne, and about 46 miles or 74 kilometers east of Denver. According to the U.S. Census, the town of Silver Plume has a total area of 0.2 square miles, all of it land. Now, this is a pretty high in elevation town. It's actually above 9,000 feet elevation or 2,077 meters. So that's kind of a little history, not really history, but a little bit of background about the town. It is very small. Everybody knows everybody. And like I said, it's kind of like a ghost town, but it lies within the Arapahoe National Forest. Now, the Arapahoe National Forest, its region is managed jointly with the Roosevelt National Forest and the Pawnee National Grassland from the United States Forest Service office in Fort Collins, Colorado. This national forest has a wildlife refuge which manages a protection for all birds and mammals. The combined facility is just over 1.7 million acres, and it's denoted as ARP, which stands for Arapahoe Roosevelt Pawnee. And separately, the Arapahoe National Forest consists of 723,744 acres. It was established on July 1st, 1908 by President Theodore Roosevelt and named for the Arapaho tribe of Native Americans which previously inhabited the Colorado Eastern Plains. The forest includes part of the high Rockies and river valleys in the upper watershed of the Colorado River and South Platte River. The forest is largely in the Grand and Clear Creek counties, but it does spill over into neighboring Gilpin, Park, Routt, Jackson, and Jefferson counties. There are local ranger district offices located in Granby and Idaho Springs. There are a total of 6 wilderness areas, including Byers Peak, Indian Peaks, James Peak, Mount Evans, Never Summer, and Vasquez Peak Wilderness. The upland hills harbor sage grouse year round, with a winter population of more than 200 birds. Golden eagles, several species of hawks, and the occasional prairie falcon are all found within this national forest. Now, all of these birds, their prey includes the Richardson's ground squirrel, white-tailed prairie dog, and white-tailed jackrabbit. Some of the other animals that inhabit this national forest include oh my gosh, I cannot talk. Some other animals that live here are the badger, muskrat, beaver, coyote, and pronghorn. It is also possible to see a raccoon, red fox, mink, long-tailed weasel, or porcupine. There are a ton of mule deer, and there are also elk here during the winter months. Moose have recently been reintroduced to the North Park and may occasionally be observed in the willow thickets along the Illinois River bottoms. There are no venomous snakes anywhere in this forest, and as far as I could find, there aren't a lot of bears or mountain lions either, so there's no real huge predators except moose. And yes, I just called a moose a predator because they are very aggressive and scary even though they do not eat us. Unfortunately, in 2020, the Arapaho and Roosevelt National Forests were affected by 5 major wildfires. These wildfires included Cameron Peak, East Troublesome, Williams Fork, Left Hand Canyon, and Calwood. And these fires burned over 25% of their total lands. The Williams Fork fire was the largest wildfire Arapaho National Forest has ever experienced until it was surpassed by the East Troublesome Fire 2 months later. As of 2024, the U.S. Forest Service is continuing to work on long-term recovery, including reforestation, stream and waterway repair, fixing road and trail damage, repairing fences between range allotments, repairing all the historic buildings that were damaged during the fire, and identifying and treating noxious weeds within the fire footprints. In 2023, over 300,000 seedlings were planted across 1,800 acres of high burn severity forest. And if you're a film geek like me, you probably already know this, but I wanted to include this fun fact. Most of the 1984 film Red Dawn is set in the Arapaho National Forest. So now that we have a little bit of background about the area, let's dive into our case or cases today and in today's episode. So there are other podcasts that have done these cases more in depth. I'm just gonna kind of give you a brief overview. There are a lot of specifics about this case that online are reported, and I've seen numerous things. So, I'm using sources that I think are accurate. However, you never really know if what you're reading online is true or not. Picture this. It's summer of 1988, and Keith Reinhard, he actually was living in Algonquin, which is a Chicago suburb, and he had been a sports writer for 22 years for the Chicago Daily Herald. Primarily, what he covered was high school sports. But Keith was dissatisfied with the big city life, and he was kind of having a midlife crisis. He was desperate to make a huge change in his life to feel something. So he decided to go to Silver Plume, Colorado. Now, he did have a wife and a daughter, but he yearned for a new life in the backcountry. And he spoke to his friend, Ted Parker, and he said, he just wanted an alternative lifestyle. And Keith was really into this idea. He decided to take a 3-month leave of absence from the newspaper to experience Silver Plume for himself. Now, his friend Ted kind of planted the seed, and Keith lapped it up. He wanted to experience that. So he left behind his family temporarily, or what he thought was going to be temporarily. He explained to his wife that, he needed solitude to write a book and rediscover himself and kind of realign himself with what he wants in his life. And he was really hoping that she would join him later, that he would go out there, kind of establish something, a life out there, and she would follow him. And she actually agreed, although she agreed reluctantly. So, in the summer of 1988, Keith moved to Silver Plume and rented a modest store in the old Knights of Pythias building from Ted Parker on the town's main street. Keith set up a low profile antique business and began writing his book. He also rented a small apartment at the back of an abandoned Catholic church. Now, if that doesn't say I moved to a ghost town, I don't know what does. Renting an apartment at the back of an abandoned Catholic church. That is so creepy. I don't know. I wouldn't want to be living in somewhere that had been abandoned at all, but this was probably the only place available to someone that decided to randomly move out here on a whim instead of someone maybe, wanting to move out there and building a house. So Keith started his life there, and it was going pretty well for him, except that shortly after he moved there, he encountered severe writer's block, and he started to struggle to make progress on his novel. So, to kind of get out of this stagnant state for him, he decided that he was going to turn to nature to spark some creativity. He began taking regular hikes into the rugged Rocky Mountains. Now, this landscape, it's so beautiful and serene, but it's also very treacherous, and it offers a stark contrast to his previous life. But it also harbored secrets that would soon entangle him in a mystery deeper than he could have ever imagined. And what he found was jarring. Keith discovered that the storefront's previous owner, whose name was Tom Young, Tom had actually mysteriously vanished from Silver Plume. Now, Tom was a former high school art teacher and retired U.S. Army Special Forces veteran, and he had called the south side of Pendleton Mountain his home. He lived alone with his beloved black Labrador, Gus. Tom ran a travel bookstore on Silver Plume's main street called the Charing Cross Station. The townspeople considered Tom eccentric, recounting how he would play catch with Gus using a baby doll head. I think that's hilarious, honestly. Tom kept to himself. He was content with his dog, Gus. He was content with books, and he was very content with his solitary walks in the Rockies. The residents all respected his privacy. He wasn't mean or menacing or they just thought he was kind of a strange guy, but not a dangerous guy and not someone that they really needed to keep tabs on all the time. Now, this is where Tom's story kind of stops and starts. It's kind of confusing. Tom and his black lab, Gus, were last seen on September 7th, 1987, walking off into the Rocky Mountains. Tom had told some friends that he was planning a European vacation, but his family didn't know anything about this trip. And when police checked the usual boarding kennels where Gus was kept during such trips, Gus wasn't there. Tom and Gus were inseparable, and there was no record of a plane ticket for the supposed vacation. So Tom disappeared, and everyone just thought, he keeps to himself. He's quiet. He probably is on vacation. But when police looked into it, he was not on vacation, and him and his dog Gus were missing. So once Keith learned about this disappearance, he became completely intrigued. He questioned his friend Ted and other locals about the case, and he abandoned his original idea for his novel. He then pivoted and he began writing detailed notes based on conversations with people that lived in the town. He started drafting a fictional novel on his computer with Tom Young as its basis. This was very inspiring for him. So, in a way, those nature walks did cure his writer's block. He found out something terrible had happened, and no one really knew what happened to Tom and Gus. and Keith wanted to write about it, so he did. The book featured a character named Guy Gypsum, a composite of Young and Keith himself. So Keith sees himself in this disappearance and he starts writing. But what Keith didn't know was that his obsession with Tom's disappearance would soon lead him down a dark and treacherous path, one that he would never come back from. Then, on July 31st, 1988, some local hunters found a skeleton lying near a tree out in the wilderness. The skull had a bullet hole in it, and investigators identified the remains as Tom Young. There was a Smith & Wesson Model 36 and a backpack that were both found near Tom's body, and Tom's dog Gus was also found dead from a gunshot wound. The interesting thing is that Tom had purchased the gun just 4 days before his disappearance, and the police actually believed this to be a suicide, and the autopsy report stated that suicide was the cause of death. But a lot of the locals were very skeptical because they said that Tom would never, ever hurt his dog Gus, and many people suspected foul play, especially as a tarp was apparently pulled over the body. This is definitely common sense. If you kill yourself and your dog, you're not going to cover up your own body with a tarp because you would be dead, especially from a gunshot wound to the head. On August 3rd, Keith attended a memorial service for Tom Young, and just before their service, he spoke to an old friend back in Chicago on the phone about his chances of becoming the news bulls writer at the old paper despite the promotion of a former colleague whom he intensely disliked. It seemed that Keith was considering returning to his old job. Maybe he felt that because Tom's disappearance had been solved, allegedly, that he didn't really have any inspiration to keep his book going. Maybe he ran out of ideas and it wasn't going to be the same for him. And a few days later, on August 7th, 1988, Keith closed up shop and he told his friends in Silver Plume that he was going hiking up nearby Pendleton Mountain, which is 12,500 feet. And Keith actually had a known fear of heights, so his friends thought this was a little strange that he was going to do this hike by himself, even though he was intensely afraid of heights. Now, the night before, on August 6th, Keith had attended a party at the KP building in Silver Plume hosted by a Denver radio station. He was seen conversing with an unidentified woman, and he actually told other partygoers that he was convinced that Tom Young's death was not suicide. Keith was last seen leaving town around 4 to 5 p.m., and what made this strange was that the round trip to the mountain was around 6 hours, a mountain he had previously attempted to climb but had been thwarted by its steep and rugged terrain. Keith didn't have any proper hiking gear with him, he was only wearing tennis shoes, and he lacked the appropriate clothing for the cold temperatures on the mountain. So already, this is not looking good for Keith. And I don't know why he would attempt to do this in just tennis shoes and without gear, especially because he had attempted to climb it before, and obviously that did not work out. Now, Keith's friend, Ted, he initially thought that Keith was just joking when he mentioned his plans at the cafe. Keith said that he would be back by 10 p.m. that evening, which honestly, that is so crazy to think that you're going to go climb this very tall mountain with tennis shoes and be home by 10. That's really not realistic for a lot of people. So Ted later recalled, quote, "He was in the cafe and he told me he was going to make it to the top of the mountain. He said if he doesn't come back, I should call rescue." And he said that, and, Ted thought maybe he was joking, but Keith wasn't joking. Ted actually has a picture of Keith pointing to the mountain and saying goodbye, and that was the last that anyone had ever seen Keith Reinhard. Keith obviously failed to return home at 10 p.m. on August 7th, and the next day, August 8th, Ted Parker reported him missing. Colorado's Alpine Rescue Team launched a large search and rescue mission on and near Pendleton Mountain. Sherman Mountain and Republican Mountain were also searched during this search and rescue operation. Now, this operation involved ground search and rescue teams, planes, helicopters, and sniffer dogs. The search went on for a week, but nothing was found. And at this time, the search was the largest search and rescue mission in Colorado's history. Now, remember, this is in 1988, so of course, now in 2025, there have been larger operations, but until date, this was the largest search and rescue mission in Colorado's entire history. So that honestly says a lot about how big the scale was of this search for this man that was supposed to be doing a hike up to the mountain and just never came home. Searchers have described this search as like the proverbial needle in a haystack, that the haystack was 3,000 vertical feet on a 60-degree slope, and the search terrain was very, very difficult. Now, Keith went into the mountains wearing no more than blue jeans, a flannel shirt, and tennis shoes. He had no backpack, no equipment, and basically a typical subject of a search would have lots of clues for searchers to trace. But Keith didn't have many clues, and he didn't have many with him to leave behind. Now, the search was called off on August 12th when a Cessna Civil Air Patrol plane carrying two rescuers crashed into Pendleton Mountain on August 11th, killing the pilot, Terry Leedens, and seriously injuring the spotter, whose name was Don Drobny. The only clue left behind was a piece in Keith's book that he had begun to write. Now, his friends found it on his computer after he went missing, and it was concerning. It was about the main character whose name was Guy. It said, quote, Guy Gypsum changed into some hiking boots and donned a heavy flannel shirt. He understood it all now and his motivation. Guy closed the door, then walked off towards the lush, shadowless Colorado forest above. And it's 2025 and Keith still has not been found. He walked into the forest and he was never seen again, just like the main character in his novel. Now, there are a lot of theories about this case. Suicide is, the biggest theory, I think. People think that maybe he was depressed because he thought he had this big revelation about Tom Young and he was going to write about, his disappearance. And then when Tom wound up dead, maybe Keith just thought that's the end. Like, there's nothing else for me. We really don't know what happened, but suicide is brought up in this case. He had not mentioned any depressive thoughts or suicidal ideations to any friends or his wife. I think misadventure is what actually probably happened. I think Keith was trying to copy or emulate the adventurous character in his novel, and I think he maybe went out to get some like real world experience or experience on the trail to write about it. And I think there was an emergency. Who knows what happened? But I think this is the most probable cause for why he did not come out of the forest. People also think that he might have disappeared to start a new life. A lot of people online speculate that maybe moving to Silver Plume wasn't enough for Keith, and he actually wanted to escape further and start a new life away from everyone that knew him. Again, this seems unlikely as he was close to his wife and his daughter, Tiffany. But some people recall that he was fascinated by the idea of visiting West Virginia. Also, Keith attended a party the night he disappeared, and people did see him talking to that unidentified woman. Now, people believe her name was either Greta or Gretchen, and that she was from Denver. Police were looking to talk to her, but I don't think they were ever able to because her identity was never really known. Some people believe that foul play was involved, just like Tom Young. Um, we're not really sure exactly what happened, but there are a lot of weird coincidences in this case just to shrug off as nothing. One man disappears without a trace, and then just a year later, another man who happens to have the same storefront and is writing a novel based off of the first disappearance also vanishes. I don't believe in coincidences, and I think something's fishy about these cases. And I think what speaks to that is that the timing is key. The timing of Keith's disappearance just 1 week after the discovery of Tom's body means that, I don't know, with all of Keith's detailed research on Tom, did Keith find evidence that, you know, had maybe something to do with his murder or his disappearance? I don't really know, but author Mike Eccles wrote a book about the possibility of nuclear dumping in the Silver Plume area, and this is what he had to say. That fall, my auto mechanic Roger Holman told me that on several occasions during the early morning hours, he had seen large trucks driving up the dead end road by his house. He said that the trucks were carrying nuclear waste from the Rocky Flats nuclear weapons plant 30 miles away. Waste which was being dumped in the shaft of the supposedly abandoned mine. I did keep my mouth shut, except for telling two acquaintances, fellow freelance writer Sarah Lady and Silver Plume bookstore owner and political activist Tom Young. Now, with these rumors and these supposed sightings, would Tom want to take action and expose the dumping? That is possible. The film crew filming Lost in the Wild explored some abandoned mine shafts believed to contain illegally dumped nuclear waste, and they actually took a Geiger counter with them, several of them actually. They had to leave the mine out of safety as the radiation readings rose to potentially dangerous levels. But was the spike caused by dumped waste or just naturally occurring uranium in the area? I just don't know. And also, I'm going to throw out the theory of a serial killer only because it was in sources online. Now, Lieutenant Steve Gramillion, he was asked if there was a serial killer in Silver Plume, and the lieutenant believed it was possible. The area seems to have claimed multiple lives over the years, and he said, quote, I mean, we have found a couple of skulls up in Silver Plume in the last few years. And when pressed for more information, he could not provide details due to it being an active investigation. He did state, however, that they tested the remains and none of the skulls were Keith's. So tell me how they are finding multiple skulls in this area and no one's going to really make a big ruckus about that. That is actually really crazy, in my opinion, that you have people going missing, skulls being found, and the skulls do not belong to the person who is missing. So who do they belong to? I don't know. That's just crazy. And the fact that a lieutenant said, I don't know, maybe there's a serial killer. It's just so telling, I think. Now, Keith's son, whose name is Kai Reinhard, he believes his father disappeared due to foul play. He had an interview once and he said that he thinks his dad stumbled across something and that Keith knew too much. When asked if he thinks the mystery of his father's disappearance will be solved, Kai said, yes, if someone knows something, that comes forward. There's a plaque dedicated to Keith in the Rocky Mountains near Silver Plume, and it says, Oh God, I want to wander. I want to wander till I die. With the mountains as my living room, my only roof is the sky. These words were written by Keith himself before he vanished. In 30 years of operation, the Colorado Alpine Rescue Teams have found every single person they searched for. However, they discovered no trace of Keith Reinhard. Some have concluded that Keith Reinhard and Tom Young were murdered, noting that both men rented the same space to run their shops. Perhaps both of them stumbled across something they were never meant to know. On January 31st, 1990, Unsolved Mysteries, they actually aired a segment on the Reinhard story. It focused on speculation that Keith may have staged his disappearance. Police received over 270 tips, but no new evidence was found. And in early 2020, filmmaker J.J. Kelly and journalist Kinga Phillips tried to figure out what happened to Reinhard on an episode of their new Travel Channel documentary series Lost in the Wild, Secrets to Die For. Now, this is the filmmaking crew that I mentioned earlier that went to the mines with Geiger counters. Phillips said, seeing that location, hearing the depositions of people that have something to do with the story, we sincerely hope that would trigger something for someone who maybe hiked in the area, who maybe connected with Keith, who maybe saw something, heard something that they didn't think mattered. But if they saw the show and thought, wow, that little bit of information that I had, if I bring that to someone, it could actually further this investigation. That's our hope. That's what Philip said. They're hoping to solve this by filming this and making people think about way back when Keith went missing. JJ Kelly and Kinga Phillips, they went to Silver Plume in July, whereas Keith disappeared in August. This meant that the crew had a little bit more daylight than Keith would have had on his hike. Despite this, they failed to reach the summit of Pendleton Mountain before sunset. They climbed 9,600 feet, with 2,600 feet left before the light faded. They decided to spend the night on the mountain and descend in the morning. They took turns being lookouts in case any wildlife came near their campsite. They had a sleepless night on the mountain and found the experience harrowing. They described the hike as a death trap, even for experienced climbers. Most recently, a documentary called Dark Side of the Mountain, directed by Eric Walter, that's currently in post-production. It features exclusive interviews with Reinhardt's family and friends, and never-before-seen footage Keith shot himself. On the website, it says, looking forward to the new documentary, Dark Side of the Mountain, which may shed some light on what happened. In the process of filming, they claimed that they found Keith's wallet on Pendleton Mountain, but they never found anything else. I'm not sure if I really believe this claim, only because search and rescue had been going on for a week. They didn't find anything. So, somewhat, I don't know, 40 years later, maybe not 40, I can't do mental math, but definitely over 30 years later, and you're saying that you found his wallet. Unless it had his ID in it, I'm not sure that I would necessarily buy that, but I am looking forward to this coming out because I want to see it. I want to watch this. It seems very interesting, and it seems like a documentary I would really enjoy. I actually looked at the Unsolved Mysteries website and found Keith's case on there, and I found an interesting comment that I want to read. This person said, I am personally of the belief that Keith's death was also a suicide, and I believe the thing that connects the two is carbon monoxide poisoning. Back in the 80s, no one knew that it was associated with causing suicidal behavior, but a study published in 2021 associated with CO buildup in the cabin of Ford Expeditions and Explorers showed that cops driving those cars had a shockingly high rate of suicide if their cabins had CO building up, leaking into the ventilation system from the engine. This commenter goes on to say, I believe the two men, both leasing the same space and spending a lot of time there during the day without realizing it, were under the influence of CO poisoning. No one had CO detectors in homes and businesses back then, and it was a big problem. While acute toxicity leads to hypoxia and death, subtle CO poisoning causes brain dysfunction similar to people suffering from traumatic brain injuries. Perhaps the researchers could find out what kind of heating or boiler system in their office was used back in 1987 to rule out this possibility. So I just found that comment very interesting. I think it's maybe credible, something to look into, but it wouldn't explain where Keith is at. I mean, it explains some, but not where Keith's body is at. After the extensive search, you'd think that they would have found him if he was suicidal. If he killed himself, where's his body? I want to know your thoughts on this case, these cases. I keep saying case. It's like two cases, but Tom was found, so it's like one case, whatever. You know what I'm trying to say. I also want to know if the audio sounds weird. Like I said, I think it's just in my head, but I don't actually know. So if you think it sounds odd, not like it normally does, please let me know, comment, whatever. Thank you so much for that. As always, recreate responsibly, and remember, sometimes the great outdoors aren't always great. Okay, well, the poll was literally 50-50 for personal things before the show or after the show. I decided to do it after because I know if you're a supporter, thank you so much, and you would stay to listen to what I have to say anyways. So I actually had the day off of work yesterday, and I went hiking in American Fork Canyon here in Utah. It was such a great hike. I did the Silver Lake Trail. And it was just so pretty. The aspens are all bright gold and the weather was nice. I actually saw a snake, which I think is odd for this late in the year, but it was a little baby one, not a rattlesnake, just maybe a garter snake. Beautiful, beautiful hike. And I hope that wherever you are at, you are able to get outside and enjoy the fall. It is coming early this year. It has come early this year. But man, I love the fall. I think it's such a reset. People think like, New Year's, but I think fall and spring are really very transformational times in our lives. And each year they happen. And each year I just feel like I just have so much energy and so much creative energy. And I just really, really love it. So I hope you're having a good fall. I hope you're getting out there, even if it's just sitting on your patio and enjoying the fall breeze and the leaves. I think times like that are really special. So thank you so much for listening. I will see you next time. Thanks for listening to Morbid Outdoors. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, make sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. It's free, easy, and it helps us out immensely. When you subscribe, you get updates on our latest episodes, and it also boosts our visibility, making it easier for other curious souls to find us. Another great way to support Morbid Outdoors is by leaving us a review. Whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, a quick review helps us know what you love about the show. Find us on Instagram and Facebook at Morbid Outdoors Podcast. You can email us case suggestions and your campfire stories at morbidoutdoorspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for the support, and I'll see you next time.